Welcome to the Spirit of Truth video podcast. Joining me today is my good friend, Buck Weimer. He's been in the Urantia community for a long time and turned many people on to the Urantia book, including my own parents. So we're gonna have a great conversation. Stick around, it's gonna be great. Welcome back. Today on the Spirit of Truth video podcast, joining me is an amazing person, my friend, Buck Weimer. Welcome, Buck. Thanks for joining us, man.
Well, thank you, Derek, for inviting me on. It's a real treat and pleasure to be here. And I want to congratulate you on the great work that you're doing with this program. I've seen most of your videos and they are really excellent. And I wanted to congratulate you on accepting the Van and Amadon Service Award. So congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I wouldn't be in this chair if it wasn't for you. And you know that. So God bless you and God bless us all. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Derek.
So anyway, enough of the pleasantries, because you know I love you with all my heart, and Arlene and the beautiful boys. Say hi to them. I love them all. So if you guys at home don't know, let's start from the beginning. This man witnessed my own birth, pretty much.
I was there when it happened.
So we go way back. Our family goes way back. I was born in Pueblo, Colorado, and your family, my family, were closest friends. You turned my parents onto the Urantia book, had their first study group with you and Arlene, and my parents split, and I grew up in Chicago. But nonetheless, we've always been family, and coming back here to Colorado is just so poetic for me. It fills my heart with joy. It feels like I'm finally fulfilling my destiny to be with you guys and to be here and doing this work and bringing it forward. And so I want to thank you. Thank you for laying down that foundation for all of us.
Well, I accept your thanks on behalf of my thought adjuster.
Yeah, well, my thought adjuster thanks your thought adjuster. How's that?
Good.
So let's start from the beginning. You know, I mean, you're such an accomplished, experienced man and a man of action. And I have nothing but admiration for that. So if we could maybe start from the beginning, what was your childhood like? What started this?
Well, I had a very difficult childhood. Being raised without a father was what I would consider a great handicap for any mortal to have in any life. And it's not always visible, the handicap, but it's a handicap. And so it took me a lot of personal experience to work over that, overcome that, and hopefully transcend it.
Yeah, so that's not the first person who I know who's got father problems.
That's true. But when I finally, via the Urantia book, of course, accepted God as my true father, that was my turning point in my life and changed it forever.
You know, that's like the second time this week where I've heard of people who haven't had fathers around, but there is a potential to like God adopt you, kind of, right? Is that a process you went through?
Absolutely. Yeah. When I accepted that as God being my true father, I mean, you can have a biological father and other types of father figures, but when you have a spiritual father, which is your true essence, that makes a dynamic imprint on you. It did certainly on me. And so, you know, my story with that actually began back early on in 1970 when Arlene and I got married. And when we got married, we decided to travel. So we backpacked around the world for 2 years. They were hippie backpackers, or trekkers as they called them in those days. And so it was a very interesting trip, but it turns out we were actually part of a movement called the Hippie Highway, of which we didn't know what we were doing, but we were actually part of it. We didn't know that until some of the research that I had done as a result of trying to write our memoirs about it. Okay. And so it really was literally hundreds, thousands of young hippie trekkers from North America and Western Europe going across Asia. going through Turkey, going through Iran, going through Afghanistan, going through Pakistan, India, Kathmandu and Nepal, Southeast Asia, and many of us end up in Bali. When Arlene and I were in Bali, we had an opportunity to crew on a 40-foot sailboat going across the Indian Ocean to the Seychelles Islands, one of our destinations that we'd always hoped to go to. But all we had to do was cross the Pacific Ocean, and we would have completed our
full trek.
Yeah. So we both went into prayer time. I mean, we weren't real spiritual or religious, but we were in Israel for the birth of the traditional Jesus birthday, and we were also in Kathmandu in May for the traditional Buddhist birthday. So when that happened, we started to look within ourselves and say, something's going on here that's we need to pay attention to. So anyway, when we were in Bali and we decided, well, we had this opportunity to go on this boat, should we do it or should we not do it? And so we both went into prayer in separate places, and it's the only time in my life I ever heard an inner voice.
Really?
And that inner voice said to me, a man must do everything. Oh. And when I heard that, that was my message, that I knew then that I had to take the sailboat trip across the Indian Ocean. And so Arlene had a similar experience, and hers was about fear. And hers was that, well, if you're afraid, do it, to overcome her fear.
Wow.
So anyway, we sailed about, it was close to 3,000 miles across the Indian Ocean, ended up in the Seychelles Islands. But part of the reason I'm telling that story is, had we not made that decision, we might not have encountered the Urantia book as a result of that. Because when we returned home, briefly, Arlene got a teaching job at Florida Tech University in Florida, of course. And one of her students, who was an ex-Vietnam vet, totally wigged out with post-traumatic stress, gave her the Urantia book, said, hey, if you want to learn something about personality, which is what she was teaching, she said, take a look at this.
Oh, yeah.
Really. But Arlene had just gotten her PhD, and she was not interested in another book, especially one of that size.
Wait, so she got exposed first?
Yes.
Even though we know what happens.
Yeah, well, she brought that book home, threw it on the coffee table, and said, one of my students said to take a look at this and see what you think. I was currently studying Suzuki and Buddhism and that trend of study. But I took one look at it and I said, wow, this looks like something very, very different. So I better investigate this. In the meantime, Arlene with several of the students from Florida Tech University in Florida, bought an old school bus, converted it into a camper, and drove from Orlando, Florida to Costa Rica.
Wow.
So there was 8 of us on that, and so we had a little bit of a commune down there, you might call it, a spiritual commune. But anyway, it lasted maybe 8 or 9, 10 months, something like that. It was a worthwhile experience, but we knew that's where we both finished the Urantia book there, and so we both felt this desire to serve.
So upon completing reading, you felt an overwhelming desire to go out and do some service.
Yeah. And also, we also knew it was time to have a family. I mean, we were so inspired by the life of Jesus and his parenthood with his brothers and sisters that we thought, well, now we have a guide. Now we have some essence of direction that we can take in which we want to do it. Because I come from a broken home, and Arlene, although she came from a good family, it was a bit dysfunctional in a lot of ways, and so we returned to New York, and we started investigating where other readers are, and so we contacted the foundation, and John Hales. Yeah, John Hales saw us, and he took one look at us. I mean, we looked like we literally just come down out of the mountain, out of the trees.
Chased you away.
No, he didn't. He was smart. John's a good guy. He said, "Get to a study group." That's what he told us. Get to a study group, which was the best advice we could have received at that time. We were going back to California in Venice, where we knew a lot of people where we had lived before, and we joined a study group there. We met Julia Fenderson, who was head of the Fuchsia out there, and so that is our initial involvement, and we got into it. So, as part of our reading, we understood that, a good place to live, generally speaking, is kind of a mid-size city, not too big, not too small. And so Arlene was looking at the journals and the psychology journals, and there was an opening for a job at the Colorado State Hospital. So they invited her out for an interview. And so we agreed before she left that, well, if it looks like a good place to raise a family, and
So which was Pueblo.
which was Pueblo, yeah.
Pueblo, Colorado.
So she went out for the interview, and they accepted her, and we said, okay. So that was our
Introduction to Pueblo.
introduction
What
to
brought you
Pueblo.
here?
Yeah, and what brought us to the Pueblo in Colorado. And so
So what year was that you moved to Pueblo?
that was 1974, very end of 1974.
And then you met my parents in 76?
Six, I think.
Because I know my sister was born in 76. And they
Yeah,
met in
yeah,
76.
yeah. So then, we both established careers there, and I worked at a local hospital for 30 years, and Arlene eventually opened up a private practice, and we raised our children. We had 3 sons, and raised our children, and as they got older, then we more and more got involved in the Urantia community.
Yeah.
So which was very.
How long did it take for you to, like, how old did they have to get for you to feel that you could finally step out a little bit more?
Yeah, well, it's difficult to say, but I think we had three boys in 5 years, so there was a 5-year gap there. So I think when the youngest one, looking at Adam, our youngest son, when I don't know, he was about, he was in high school, and so I think when he was a junior or senior, the other 2 boys had already been grown, and Matthew, the middle one, had already started college. So I think at that point is when we decided to, get involved with the larger community, so to speak, even though we had a study group in Pueblo and still do.
Yeah.
And so there's several study groups in Pueblo. And so we were actually even part of the Boulder school up here for some time.
Yeah.
So we participated in a lot of activities up here. But again, it was a long schlep from Pueblo up here with boys, with 3 children, So but we came as often as we can. Again, mostly to commune with our brothers and sisters, and so then when the boys were all out of the house, then I decided to get involved in the Urantia Book Fellowship, and one of my emphasis when praying with God and asking what is His will for me, I believe that what He did for me, He said, well, I know you're a good traveler, so let's get you traveling, So my first excursion was to Guatemala in Central America with David Cantor, and he was then the chair of the International Committee.
Oh, right.
So,
Very cool.
So that was my first introduction to international stuff, and I just loved it, and even though I'm not a great linguist, still it's not about language as it is connecting, communing, and developing those relationships. And so that was my beginning with that. So
and then you've taken off from there, and now you've taken on new ventures. But before we get into those, perhaps we can talk about a little bit of your experiences overseas.
Sure.
Because I feel like there's been a nice little lineage of that international fellowship chair position that I was blessed enough to sit in for a little while. I felt like I could do a little bit more international service in this venue in doing outreach through media and broadcast and stuff. And I would like to know what your experience and feedback over the years of your stepping out across seas. I mean, I'm sure I could say, okay, what was it like in South America versus what it was like in India and all that stuff. But if there's an overarching human angle that you've noticed, a trend, occurrence of some sort, is there anything that you've noticed?
Well, I think first of all, going to all these places that I've been blessed to be able to go to, having some readers there was a great blessing, because you have local people, in the local conditions sharing local, stuff with you. And so that was a real blessing. I think if I could say there's one thing I learned, and just personal experience, and maybe somebody else would have a different experience, but, I went over much of the world and met many cultures in many countries, and regardless of the culture or country or tradition of where I visited, everybody that I encountered, whether they be, part of the Urantia movement or not, everybody is interested in the life of Jesus. Everybody want to know more. Everybody wants to know more about Jesus.
Gee, I wonder why. Maybe the spirit of truth?
It's like, why? But I have found that, and, I give you a lot of examples, but we were in Peru, and Costco, I think. Costco, you were there, right? Peru.
Cusco, we went there.
Cusco, yeah. So I had a bus driver taking us around a couple of sites, and Arlene and I were the last ones off the bus, and so I got to talking to the bus driver, and he was telling us a lot of experiences about Cusco, and of course we love that place. And so I did a little bit of a Jesusonian thing with him. I said, well, now that you've been very gracious about showing us around Cusco.
Did you show him the highways and byways?
Let me ask you, how do you feel about Jesus?
Okay.
He said, I'll tell you. And this is one of those experiences, he said, let me tell you. He said, the church and the church organization, he literally kind of tried to gag himself, like that there. He said, but Jesus, he said, I love Jesus.
Yeah. There's a lot of people who feel that, We were talking about that today, is the human heart responds with so much conviction to those teachings of Jesus and those words of Jesus and the feeling of the love coming from Jesus. Yet there's so much ideological controlling of Jesus that comes from these institutions, Got to set them free, got to set them so free. And I think that comes in, like what you did on that bus is the human element of it. You drew that out and you did it with kindness and grace and just asking a question. It's like, who Jesus taught the most, he said the least to, right? And here you are internationally traveling, don't know the language with someone, talk about being able to say very little, but that love in your eyes that I know so well, and that is Jesus' love coming through you, anyone can respond to that. That will register in their heart. Yeah.
It was a memorable and profound experience. Even though I never saw the guy again. I probably never will see him again. Maybe on the Mansion World, our memories will connect, and so that type of thing. But,
is that all that you guys? Is that how you ended the conversation? Just was like church, Jesus, yes.
Yeah. And so we said thank you and adios, and we separated. I never saw him again. There was a reader there that I encountered that I knew, and I still kind of know a little bit. But so there was a reader, and now I think there's more than a reader there in Cusco. So there's a reader there that we connected with, but this one with this driver was special somehow. Yeah, special somehow.
And it was in passing, is that
as you go by,
as you go by,
good
for you, bringing the good cheer. Yeah. So take me to another country.
Well, India was. I was there a couple of times in India. India is a very interesting place in a lot of ways. They're very accepting of all religions in the sense that they won't harass you about it. But of course, they have a very big part of their consciousness is in reincarnation. So we had a book fair booth there, and of course, part of what we had up there were the Ascent to Paradise. Chuck Montgomery posters that we had.
Nice.
So we found that to be really a very, very helpful groundbreaker for them, because even though they pretty much all believed in reincarnation, after they've served their karma, then they ascend.
Right.
They move on and they go on, even though the final destination for them is not paradise, but still they were so interested in the ascent, and going through all the
Good foundation to work off.
It was, yeah. And so we had, and even with Muslims in India, we had same thing, same great conversations about the ascent. And so we found that to be really, really, really helpful. And so, but again, more interesting, you have a conversation. I had a sadhu. A sadhu is sort of an Indian, sort of considered a wise person who came to our booth regular. He came in, and so I developed a bit of a relationship with him. And he was a really, really, he was a really cool guy in the sense that he would ask questions, and he wouldn't try to push his particular agenda on us or anybody at the booth, but he kept coming back and asking very pertinent questions about, well, what about, but again, what about Jesus? I said, so what can you tell me about Jesus? So I can tell you a lot about Jesus, but it'd be better if you
found out for yourself.
Yeah. So what we did and what we do in India and a lot of places, we actually give a lot of books away, and by then, of course, we had Harry McMullen's
Part 4,
which was invaluable to people, and so Harry ended up giving us a lot of them, so we could just give them away, But sometimes we'd charge a little bit of money just to have people invest in it, and so that was a good experience in India, and so like I said, we went back several times, and there were a couple of readers there. The one guy that we knew, I ended up graduating, but it was unusual. We still haven't been able to establish a real
readership
foothold there. We really haven't. Of all the places that I've been, it's probably been the most difficult place that I have found to establish that sort of core group of solid readers who are totally committed to the revelation.
Right.
So it's very difficult for India, but other places I've been. I love South Korea. I've been to South Korea.
You've been there a lot,
multiple times.
And I'm friends with Jisoo Han because of you guys. She's awesome, and you guys kind of discovered her as a talent, right?
Yeah. Jisoo
That's a good story too.
Yeah, she's a cool young lady, and we just love her, of course. And so,
tell me more about South Korea.
Well, when we went over there again, I virtually knew nobody, but we went over there for the purpose of establishing a booth at a book fair, and boy, I met some people really fast. And one of my favorite, maybe my favorite person, there's a guy by the name of Sai Chang. Sai Chang is just, he's retired now. He was a businessman, he was an engineer, but he was just a kind of a brilliant guy, and so kind and so generous, and so he, from what he has done, they have developed several websites where they have hundreds of visitors and members of that, and there's more than one. They have a couple of websites, and so they're doing a lot to spread the revelation there.
They are.
Part of that may be, and what Sai and I suggested, that may be because it might be perhaps that some of the Melchizedek teachers got over that far because they seem to be pretty good in accepting God as a father. They seem to be pretty good about that, and which other cultures, some have a difficult time with that, but over there, they just, I mean, there's a strong Christian community there anyway, but there's been some tension, you might say, between the Orthodox Christian community and the Urantia book community. There is a reverend over there, Reverend Yi, who openly uses the Urantia book for his congregation.
Awesome.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I often said, show me a minister who actually teaches the teachings of Jesus, and you'll see me there. And so because they all teach the teachings about Jesus.
I know.
We know what they have done with that. They build a cult around the person of Jesus, which is the last thing he wanted. But this, Reverend Yi, he's a Presbyterian by scholar. He's a minister through the Presbyterian process, but he's obviously bright enough and bold enough, I might say, to adopt the teachings of Jesus from the Urantia book and teach them to his congregation. Now, we're not talking about a big congregation, but again, we're talking about a group of very dedicated people. And so, they have I perceive South Korea as being the launching pad for all of Asia for the revelation. Several, including several of the readers in South Korea, in Seoul mostly, are literally chomping at the bit, waiting for the printing of the Chinese edition because they want to take it there. And awesome. Who better to take it?
Yeah, better than us.
Better a bunch of white guys.
Yeah, I know. Seriously.
So, but they're chomping at the bit, literally. Say, well, when can we take this to? When? When are we going to be able to do it? And the foundation is doing it, and they're doing a very good job, and they're being very patient about it, as they should be. So we have to all be patient, and when it's ready, it will happen. I certainly hope that I'm in physical condition enough to be able to go there and take it there myself. I'd love to do it,
That'd be poetic.
So there's a very strong Christian community in China. The problem is the Chinese government.
There's an even stronger secular community in China.
Yeah. But the Chinese government and the administration, they don't know how big it is because they have house churches over there, which are a lot like study groups. And the reason why they have house churches is because they could have a church, but the government controls it.
Ooh.
They do.
Ooh.
But house churches, they have no clue how many there are. But I would suspect, there's
growing.
Well, there's thousands of them. Again, they have no idea how many. So if we could get the revelation
into those house churches,
some of those, that would transform that.
I think they would love just to learn about how the apostles and others, the first formation of following the teachings of Jesus after he passed away, like that was in the houses, just like they're doing right now in China.
Exactly.
That's special.
Yeah. And so what I've read, I've read a couple of books on the Christian community there. And what I've read is, and one of them is Jesus in Beijing, written by a New York Times magazine professional who's been there forever. And it's his thinking that many of the Chinese Christians have an almost innate desire to return on the old Silk Road to Jerusalem.
Interesting.
Now, but think about if that were possible.
They got to go through all of the Middle East
with the revelation, that they would have a better chance at maybe some of the Muslim.
There could be a little pacification.
Yeah, so it may be part of the whole process of the seraphim to spread the revelation, because we know that what I understand, the first 100 years of the revelation is guided by the seraphim of the church, and then thereafter, the seraphim of progress is going to be taking over. So I think that may be the timing for that. Who knows? But
how poetic! That'd be a nice handing off of the baton right in the Middle East, right on the right over the Second Garden area. Get to there. But it would be beautiful to see China enter in the Holy Land and the real pilgrims, not just the nation going there. Obviously, we don't want to see more occupation everywhere, but real truth seekers entering the gates of other truth seekers and coming together and celebrating that.
Yeah.
So you've had the opportunity also with your interfaith work too. You've gone to a few parliaments of world religions and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Our first one was in Barcelona. See, what else? We were also in Australia. Of course, we went to the one in
you went to Salt Lake too.
Salt Lake City, and then we went to the recent one in Toronto. Yeah, and so I don't know if they've established where the next one's going to be, but we find them to be a really excellent experience as far as experiencing brothers and sisters around the world.
Yeah.
And, obviously they're not, or may not even hear about the revelation, but the sense that everybody has there, that I get, is that, we're all brothers and sisters in this, and we all have some sort of faith, ever how we interpret that. And that's what Jesus taught us. He told the apostles, when did I ever teach you? Who was it? James. And when did I ever teach you that you need to think alike, or you need to act alike, or you need to,
Yeah. Just
wash
be
your
it.
hands, same. Yeah. We're together in spirit. And that's how my sense for all the experiences I've had with the Parliament of the World's Religions. That people go there, and again, there's literally hundreds of different faith walks there, but you can encounter anybody and get a hug. And
Yeah, they're your brother or sister.
They're your
I
brother and
loved it. I
sister,
remember
that's
walking around that, and it was just, I never exchanged so many smiles without even like stopping and talking to someone. It was just that nod.
yeah,
You're
yeah.
a fellow child of God.
Yeah,
so am
yeah,
I.
yeah.
I appreciate you. Keep doing what you're doing. I'll keep doing what I do. And good hugs. And just the people who were there saw the value in sharing the good in each other instead of the restricted beliefs and then defending that physically. You know, it's just, what do we have in common? What is the fabrics of our unity and connection? I'm sure you felt that too.
Sure, absolutely, yeah, and I always enjoyed that part of the revelation with Simboitin, you know, with the school that
Urmia.
Yeah, and the founding principle for that, I think the only one, is that no person or no belief system can lord it over another. And they use that word lord, can lord it over another. And I think that's, again, the sense that I get in the Parliament is that, you know, nobody tries to do that. I mean, they're open to it if you want to pursue it. It's not like they're locked out. You know, if you want to pursue and learn more or share more about a person's faith walk, they're, of course, very open to it. But I like the Simboitin principle of, you know, no one person or no one religion can lord it over another. And so, so I think that's very significant when we, you know, we of the believers of the fifth epical revelation take it out. And so, we have to be cautious about that. You have to be respecting of other cultures, of other persons especially. And, you know, just...
Well, I like your point. I like what you said, or your perspective on South Korea, because it makes me feel like the level of self-importance for the Western white man doesn't have to be that much. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like we have to save everyone. You know, I think there's a part in the Urantia book where it says India would readily take on the teachings of Jesus, but not the occidentalized version of him.
Exactly.
Right? And it's nothing against your skin tone, man. Mine's whatever it is. Yours is whatever it is. But these cultures are so steeped so deeply that it's really tough to get over the intellectual properties that kind of separate us a little bit. So I like your idea of saying, well, if you empower someone, maybe they'll reach out and empower their neighbor. And I don't have to leapfrog everybody and empower this group.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So,
and it reminds me of apostle work, right? How you're like sending people out to do this work. So I have a question for you is, spreading the revelation all this time for the Urantia community before you maybe were even engaged in the fellowship and other things like that, did you feel a sense of similarity or camaraderie or connection with maybe some of the apostles? Not so much that maybe you had the threat of being crucified upside down or something like that, but you got to travel and share the good news and share the teachings of Jesus and then have like experiential connections with Jesus, like Jesus deja vu, I call it, or something like that. You know what I mean? Like he was probably here and did this, you know, thought these things while looking at this and stuff like that. But yet we are so blessed to live when we live that it's a little safer for us. Did you feel a culmination of that at all while you were traveling and sharing?
Well, you know, I always felt that, you know, I had my seraphim guiding me. You know, I always felt like even though sometimes I was alone, most times I wasn't, but even sometimes I was alone, I always felt connected.
Okay.
And, you know, I may not always have been able to verbalize what that connection is or was, but it was a feeling and I knew it was there. And if you have that, then there's no fear. You know, because there's no fear, you just go out and do the best you can for the time you have, because you know you have a limited amount of time in a particular culture or on a particular mission. If you call them a mission, you have a particular amount of time. And so, whereas time is not the most important thing, of course, but you still have to be aware of that. So, you try to, get the most you can out of the short amount of time you have.
Yeah.
So you don't sleep a lot. At least I never did. You don't sleep a lot. You eat a lot because a lot of the people that you're with, that's what you do. That's what you do. Yeah. Well, which is good because you can share the local food and at the same time, it's almost like, the Last Supper type of thing. And I've experienced that a couple of times, because this is the last time we're going to be together.
Yeah.
Who knows for how long, and so.
Well, I noticed you initiated that when we were in Croatia and we had our Last Supper kind of communion congregation of the people when we got to do outreach there with Jorve and his family, and that was a nice time. And that was the first time I got to meet Barb Mayer and Charlene and Tevo, and we had some good times out in Croatia. Thank you for that opportunity, man. That was awesome. I still keep in touch with them.
Well, you do. Good for you. Yeah. Good for you. Yeah. So how was that experience for you overall?
That was awesome. I was just coming off of my politically active days of like trying to. In that time, it was my feeling that I needed to serve like you did, but I wasn't as equipped with such teachings of Jesus that I could really help in the ways that I wanted to fully help. So that allowed me the opportunity to then take my service not so much from the material, but to more of the spiritual world. And I got peace. I calmed down, and that was very necessary. I don't think I would be in this position if I wasn't graceful enough to handle different opinions and different situations like that. So thank you.
No, thank you. I thought you did a really, really excellent, sparkling job over there on everything that you did. And it was a real treat to watch you and be with you while you were doing that. So,
thanks, man.
And you did good videos and
thank you.
Did a lot of really good, still lasting stuff. Like you said, you're still in touch with.
Yeah, those guys.
Those guys. And so, again, that's what it's all about. You make the personal connections, but at the same time, you also try to build a little bit of a community. Okay. So you try to get that community feeling as part of that overall experience. Say, well, we're not in this alone. We're all in this together. But, like many cultures and a lot in South America and a lot in Korea, they still, because of their culture, I think they still look towards us because we're like the original readers, because it came through Chicago, and so they still kind of look towards us for direction in a lot of ways. I say, well, how, like even in South America, I got a lot of questions about how do you run a study group?
Oh, okay.
I mean, and they were sincere, how do you run a study group? How do you do that?
Right.
And so, it was somewhat difficult saying, well, everybody does their own thing because they're looking for direction. So they're looking for direction. Say, well, you can't tell them to do their own thing and at the same time not give them any direction. So you had to kind of generalize. And we had a couple of handouts that we would give them that maybe helped. And so we tried to mentor them a little bit on it. But again, the main thing we said was to have regular study groups that people could depend on.
Yeah.
That would happen. That if you're going to have a Monday night study group at 7:00, like we do at our house, you have it. Even if you're the only one that shows up. Even if you're the only one, you say, well, we had a meeting last night.
Me and my thought adjuster.
So, but be consistent with it, because consistency, I found, with building that community is essential. You have to have that consistency, and people know you're going to be there and you're going to do it.
Yeah. And, I'm sure that has been a social opportunity for a lot of these people. So do you find like the need for study and the need for social gathering, and are they always together? Is that the most beneficial? Or do you find that since we're all craving community and spiritual communion, worship together and stuff, we try to get it all into wherever we can, and there's only let's say there's only 5 people in your area reading the Urantia book, you're like, okay, those are my best friends, those are who I'm going to do everything with, we're going to study, it's like all of it, right?
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to see some development where there isn't so much pressure on the study group host right? Where they have to do mediation and interpersonal problem solving and stuff like that, where we can kind of share teachings and have our social life. I don't know how you feel about this, and because we're different generations. As you said, you were kind of going first in learning this study group stuff and what is outreach and what are people interested in, stuff like that. In my generation, I feel like we do a lot of our study independently because we have the internet now, and we can really do a lot of fact checking on the internet without having to get an elder's fact checked on us, right? So we kind of come into maybe these study groups or into other environments with already some information and maybe an opinion, right? And so we're kind of looking for maybe a way to just discuss these things that are bubbling, or looking for human support or something like that. So that's why I really see things that like you're doing that you're in town for, like the Urantia University, where you guys jumped online now and you have webinars and different live streams and different educational platforms that are really helping those people who can't be in your living room. That's awesome. So thank you for that. And when did you jump on that and start doing this internet video viral outreach?
Well, I think about 2 years now we've been doing that, and it's an interesting phenomenon. But I just want to digress a little bit, because when I was a hippie, and
a little, you're digressing a little.
That was in sort of like maybe the early mid 70s, I would say. Book sales of the Urantia book had what they call a WOW-E curve. It went very, very up, very, very sharply, very, very quickly. That's because a lot of hippies got into the Urantia book.
Okay.
Then it kind of leveled out. And so what you're seeing in leadership positions now are a lot of sort of ex-hippies, you might say. Mm-hmm. But the only reason I'm saying that is because I think now we're seeing, even though we may not be able to measure it correctly, a second WOW-E curve.
Second wave.
Second wave, yeah.
Okay, and what do you believe that second wave is?
You guys, with all the IT stuff, with all the electronics, I mean, we have no idea how many people are out there just perusing just part of the book or part of the life and teachings of Jesus. I mean, I'm pretty sure I understand that one of maybe the most prominent searches that we get in our website from around the world is about Jesus.
Yeah, all of them, all the sites.
They're all about Jesus. Yeah. Again, that kind of confirms what I said earlier, that people just want to know more about who this guy is, Yeah. And how he lived, mostly how he lived, and that I think that's the critical part, because it's kind of hard to switch people over to the teachings. But first, look at how he lived, and he lived that life. And well,
I think he lived a life that was pretty rugged too, and so I feel like you were a good ambassador for that, because what we didn't talk about is your motorcycle trip through the Amazon. I mean, and I'm inspired by that because the same reason why I'm inspired by the teachings of Jesus. There were some pretty virile Galilean fishermen who called him master, unbidden, right? Like, that takes leadership that you can count on, that isn't barking orders. He's there sweating and bleeding with you.
Yeah.
And so I know that you developed your scars throughout life, and you were able to apply that in your ministry and your outreach, and I'm sure it made all the difference.
It did. Yeah, it did. Well, I don't know if you want me to briefly tell that story, but
yeah, let's hear it.
It was 1964.
Okay, so before the book.
Before the book, yeah. I had recently got out of the military. I was a U.S. paratrooper from 1958 to 1961, and I was fortunate to be after the Korean War and before the Vietnam War. So I was in that time slot there where I was not involved in
too much fighting, more reconnaissance for the next one.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so that sort of introduced me to my initial sort of adventure of jumping out of airplanes, traveling. We were on Okinawa. We used to jump in Korea. We'd jump in the Philippines and other places, So in Hong Kong. But after I got out, I thought, well, kind of like what's next, for me. And so for some reason, I had this desire to go to South America.
Okay.
So I bought an old actually it was a new 1964 Honda
Motorcycle,
yeah, and I drove it all the way to Panama by myself. When I got to Panama, shortly, not too far outside of Panama, in a place called Chapo, the road stopped. And it was like
ended?
Just ended. It was like a big curtain there. Big green curtain.
Missing.
Yeah, serious. I mean, it's like a wall.
Wow.
And that wall now goes all the way down to a place called Yavisa, which is pretty far down now today. But there's still like 60, 70 miles. It's still impenetrable. There's no road. Still today. It's not impenetrable. And it's called the Darien Jungle, or as travel people would call it, the Darien Gap. So, again, it's a long story. I'll try to make it short. But when I was in Panama City, I ran into another American down there who was in the military down there, because we still had a military presence in the Panama down there because of the canal. Turns out he outfitted me with everything I needed. He thought I was crazy, of course, but when I was, but he gave me like jungle boots, mosquito net, hammock, machete, sea rations, just virtually everything I needed. So I took the motorcycle into the jungle thinking that I could follow paths, but very quickly the motorcycle died.
It broke down?
Yeah, it broke down, and I just kind of kicked it over and started walking.
Wow, so it was like a new bike too.
It was a new bike, yeah. So, I suspect some archaeologists are going to discover that in the jungle down there and figure there must have been some great seismic uplift to have a California motorcycle in the Darien jungle, But I mean, obviously, I was very close to death several times, but...
For how? Why?
Well, you get in the jungle and you figure, well, how am I going to drink?
Water, yeah.
Yeah, then run out of food. What am I going to eat?
Yeah.
And the ticks. Every day before I jumped in my hammock at night, I had to literally take my knife and scrape the ticks off of my body.
Whoa.
So, and they got into some very private parts also.
I bet.
So, I mean, and literally hundreds of them every day. And so, so the insects are the worst part about the jungle, no doubt. But my saving grace was the Indians that lived there. Wow. Most were from the Kuna tribe. And the Kuna Indians, they saved my life several times. And, and it was amazing, fortuitous that they really felt more closer akin to North Americanos than they did the Panamanians, because the Panamanians were doing the same shtick to them that we did to our Indians and pushed them back on reservations.
Got it.
So they basically hated Panamanians, I mean, the real citizens of Panama. Whereas with me, I mean, they treated me, and our dialect, English was closer to their language also than Espanol, than Spanish. And so there's a lot of little stories that I could go into, but let it just be known that they saved my life.
Thank you guys, because we wouldn't be here if it weren't for those guys saving your life.
So I ended up in Colombia, and your heritage.
Yeah.
And so the story goes on, of course, from there. But
and there's a book, just so you guys know, he did write a book, The Darien Jungle Shakedown.
Yeah, Darien Jungle Shakedown Cruise. Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
And it's on Amazon.
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon.
Get it on Amazon. I'll put a link on the description. So back, you were in Colombia.
Yeah. Well, anyway, and just briefly, then I decided to keep going and ended up in Venezuela. I was in Venezuela, and it was pretty wild. There was a lot of rebellion going on.
Like
then.
revolution or something?
Yeah, a lot of that going on. And I was in the city park there in the capital city, and gunfire broke out. While I was sitting on a bench. I was like, well,
Wow. Okay.
So I decided to leave there and went over to the Caribbean islands, thinking I was going to island hop my way back up to the States, go home, because I was pretty much depleted of money and everything else. And so I went over to Barbados and Trinidad and started island hopping my way up. Well, this is a long story. Sure. Of course, I met a young lady on the boat hopping up the Caribbean. She was going to an island called Antigua.
Yeah.
Antigua, she was going to meet her girlfriend, and her girlfriend's husband or boyfriend, not sure which, was going to sail a boat to England.
Cool.
And she said, well, why don't you go along? She said, I'll introduce you to the captain. So I said, well, okay. So we got to Antigua, and she introduced me to the captain. He was a nice guy. I liked him. And he said, little history, he was more interested in the fact that I was a paratrooper than any sail experience I had. Because he figured I was
strong and
dumb and tough and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't have any money. Okay. So I had to be able to clear immigrations in England. So part of the motorcycle deal, which is horrible, I mean, the best car I ever had was a 1955 MG TF 1500 series that I swapped for the motorcycle. Oh, horrible financial deal. But the guy promised to still pay me $200.
When you got back?
Well, whenever, So anyway, I shot him off a letter from Antigua and said, look, and the captain agreed to take me to
somewhere in between?
One of the islands there. I forget the name of it. But I said, when I get there, that $200 better be there waiting on me in General Post Office, or you're in trouble.
I'm coming to you.
Yeah. So, but I got there and it was, and so I ended up, sailing to England on this boat. It was the best boat I was ever on. It was a 160-foot schooner. It had the best teak deck and a great crew. And
so you learned how to sail then?
Learned how to sail, yeah. And so, so then I spent the summer with this gal in Europe, just hitchhiking around, and then ended up on the Canary Islands off the west coast of Africa, and looking for another road home, another trip home. So I ended up getting on a 96-foot ketch, a steel-hauled ketch that was coming back to the Caribbean. And they agreed to take me on as crew because the first mate on the run down from England had broken his thumb, so they needed an extra hand. Oh, wow. So I said, well, take me. So they agreed to take me. And so they took me, and when we got there, we crossed the South Atlantic, started island hopping up until we got to St. Thomas.
Oh, yeah, you're getting there.
When we got to St. Thomas, that's where I met Arlene. Wow. So I think of all those coincidental things that could happen.
You went around the world to find your love, man.
Yeah. But it sort of, she thought I was a little crazy too. and I was. So she didn't really kind of believe that I was going to fall in love with her and spend my life with her or anything like that. She said, how? So I'm reminding of a book that I read, a Japanese book. It was called The Man Who Fell from Grace from the Sea. And there was this longtime sailor, in Japan, almost everybody's a sailor, but he was a longtime sailor, and he fell in love with this woman on shore, and he said, well, I'm going to give up sailing and spend my life with you. So, of course, she thought, well, this is just
not going to happen.
Not going to happen. Yeah. She said, well, why would you give up the sea for me? He said, well, I'll tell you, ma'am. He said, all my life I thought I loved the sea. He said, but what I learned, the sea never loved me back.
Oh, wow. That's special. That's beautiful. It's kind of like why we love God so much.
Yeah, exactly.
You realize how much God really loves us.
Yeah.
And so it's worth it. Share the good news, man.
Yeah. So of course the rest is history. We did stay together, obviously, and
she's here now.
She's here now. We'll be celebrating our 50th wedding anniversary this coming June.
Oh, congratulations! And I know Adam just got married too. So congratulations, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. Thank you for taking us through that adventure. I think maybe we could kind of go out on some positive notes of what's the good that you've seen in this revelation and the teachings of Jesus unfold over this planet? Like, what can we look forward to for the next generation in your eyes?
Well, that's a good question, of course. I think what we can look at is, a gradual transformation of people understanding the life and teachings of Jesus. I mean, I think that would be the thing that I would consider what most people would focus on. I mean, they could talk about all the high concepts in the Urantia book, all of which are great, but in the end, you have to look at how does this help me live? So how does this help me live? No better example do we have than the life of Jesus. So look at how he lived and how he conducted his life, his personality, his...
Well, you remind me of, when we look at how Jesus lived, I was blessed enough to attend one of your presentations on moral decision-making and stuff like that. So maybe you could share a little bit of what you've learned from maybe Jesus's moral decision-making or what it's been for you. I could put you on the spot real quick before you get out of here about this moral decision-making and what it means to you. Maybe you could share a little bit more or enlighten us a little bit from your research.
Well, again, just personal experiences are only truth. And when I was a teenager, I was immoral.
Yeah, me too. So,
I was in prison. I wasn't in no home. I was in a prison cell for 16 months. Wow. And so, so morality was a lesson I had to learn. And so I became obviously very invested in it. And then once I saw the life of Jesus, I mean, the book says he was the most religious person that ever lived. Well, vis-a-vis with that, that also means he also had to be the most moral person, because morality and spirituality
hand in hand.
Hand in hand. It's difficult to separate the two. So I've done a lot of study on it. Actually, when I was in college, I did a full-blown study on moral reasoning based on the principles of Immanuel Kant, and brought up to date with Lawrence Kohlberg. Lawrence Kohlberg has these levels of moral decision, and what's important about that is that we, through making our decisions, because Kohlberg said it's not the decision that's so important, it's your thinking or your reasoning behind making that decision. So what is that reasoning? What is that thinking behind the moral decision that you make? So he had it broken down into 3 levels. Each level has 2 divisions, but he called them pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. But really what that means is you get into higher levels of moral reason. The pre-conventional is pretty selfish.
Okay.
The conventional level is, pretty much, you know what, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back.
Yeah. That's still eye for an eye type of ideology.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas post-conventional is, you make decisions based on highest principles that you know of. That may even mean breaking the law. Right. Because the laws aren't always correct.
Yeah, they don't always represent truth, really.
Exactly. And I had people give me a lot of static about that, but I say, well, would you fight for civil rights in the 60s? Yeah. I personally knew some friends that went to Canada during the Vietnam War, so they didn't have to serve.
Oh, to avoid the draft.
Yeah, right? To avoid the draft.
Yeah, that really lit a fire under a lot of people. I'm lucky I didn't have to deal with that, but that would have motivated me to take some action.
Sure. But again, that's a decision that you make.
Right.
Based on higher principles.
Right.
That, it's better to lead a peaceful life than to go off killing for no reason. No real reason. I mean, political reasons, but there's no, we don't want to get into the war. Right. But the interesting thing about Kohlberg is that before he died, he was developing a 7th level of moral reasoning. And it was really based on, and his term is cosmic consciousness.
Wow.
But he could not get any data.
When did he write that? Before your Urantia book?
I'll
have to look it up.
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's after, because he died, I think, in the 60s.
Okay.
And it was interesting, his death, too, because he was in South America, in Belize, but he contracted a disease down there while he was in the jungle and died from it.
He got a disease.
Yeah, and here, crazy me, I'm walking through a jungle like, duh, and nothing
you got that roaming Andite gene in you, man.
I don't know.
Circumnavigate the whole world.
Yeah, but to get back to Kohlberg, though, I mean, he was really a sterling guy. He did a lot with this whole moral reasoning thing. And so, again, the idea is that, and my personal thinking is that I think that moral reasoning should be taught at every level of education,
Amen.
Because how can you expect a person to make a decision based on higher moral reasoning if they don't know what it is?
Right.
How are you going to do that?
No, you're right on, because there's no capacity, a foundation to then weave higher moral reasoning onto, right? It's kind of like the thought adjuster can't come until there's this capacity for moral decision making, and then you make that moral decision, boom, now you're going somewhere.
Yeah. And I'm a personal believer that even though it's temporary, I think that our culture is currently in moral decline.
Yeah, we're backsliding a little bit.
Yeah, we're backsliding, yeah. Again, we all know and believe in the direction of light and life, of course, that's unshakable. But still, it's like the stock market. It goes up and down. There's it's not a linear path to light and life. And so I think that the whole idea of morality then builds strength in character. And by doing that, then I think that facilitates our spiritual growth.
Yeah.
Personally and culturally.
Cool.
But it's very difficult for that to happen if, you got, people making these...
It's hard to be moral when there's no morality around you.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
well, I like that it then asks you to be the exception to the rule. If there's no morality around you and you have this guidance within you, you can be moral.
Sure.
There's still opportunity to be moral. And like you said, the religious life of Jesus is such a great example to find that morality at a time when, man, there wasn't a lot of morality around him.
Sure.
Yeah. So one more question is the fact that I know that you do great work and have done great work in studying and teaching about God the Supreme. Now, that's a concept that's really new to other organizational religions and other people all around the world, this notion of the Supreme, of another facet of God's personality that is experiential and co-creative with us. Can you maybe just give us the 101 insider view or just a topical?
Well, how much time do we have?
As long as you want, man.
No, just teasing. No, some people get excited about studying the Supreme Being or the Supreme, total Supreme. Some people don't. I met a lady last night that she said, boy, as soon as I read about the Supreme, the first time I read through it, I didn't understand what I was reading. The second time I read through it, I started to get a grasp. And now that I got a grasp, I'm really interested in it. But very few people are in the Urantia movement. They could get a grasp of it, but the thinking of it is that it's really, you start off with a deity.
Okay.
It's a deity it's called supremacy of deity. So you got supremacy of deity. And that's a whole different entity from the infinite deity of Father, Son, and Spirit.
Okay.
But the Father escapes the limitations of being infinite through the process of trinitization. So you look at what he's done here now. So you have a supreme being, be aware of the word. You also have God the Supreme. And then you have the Almighty Supreme.
So there's a separation in all that?
There is. And then there's the Supreme Mind. But then what's going to happen when the 7 super universes are settled in light and life, these are all going to commingle into one entity.
Wow.
And so the fruits of the Spirit that you and I experience, we all experience, contributes to the growth of that Supreme. And so that's why Jesus said, by your fruits they shall know you. Mm-hmm. So when we look at the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man teachings, what do we have there? We got a 2-part teachings. So our fatherhood of God is our personal relationship with God. When we talk about the brotherhood of man, that's when we do our growth of the Spirit through the Spirit.
Yeah, the Spirit going out.
Yeah. So, and all that contributes to the growth of the Supreme.
Cool.
So that's why they ask us, are you willing to make that commitment to doing the fruits of the Spirit to contribute to the growth of the Supreme? They ask us in the book, are we willing to do that? And so anyway, it can get very complicated very fast. For instance, I just learned that God is Supreme, Supreme Being, and the Almighty Supreme each have separate personalities.
Wow.
So just like the infinite Trinity, the Father, Son, they each have separate personalities.
Right.
So that when my belief is that when we have the supremacy of deity, then we have three separate entities. I mean, you throw mine in there, but we still have those three entities in there of the Almighty Supreme, Supreme Being, and God is Supreme.
Wow.
Now, when the word God is used, as in God is Supreme, or whenever we're even children of God, whenever the word God is used in the Urantia book, it's always associated with personality. Always.
Okay.
So whenever you see the word God used in the Urantia book, in whatever reference, it's always associated with personality. So the revelation, in my belief, fifth epical revelation, is about personality. Because Jesus never taught about the Father's personality. He never taught that. So why is that? Why did he never teach about the personality? But that is the function, perhaps, not the only function, but the primary function of the fifth epical revelation. So we're moving from God as a king in the Old Testament to God as a father. Now, God is a person, a loving person.
Yeah.
So you can see how that is part of the growth of...
I do, and I have a question is that, it's almost like, but yet Jesus's personality or nature was revealing the character of the loving Father, right?
Absolutely was. Yeah, no doubt about that. And it's important to keep in mind also that Jesus wasn't a dual personality.
Right.
He was, even though he was a dual origin, he was still a single personality. Right. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. He revealed the love of his Father. That was his purpose, is to reveal the love of the Father. But he didn't, in his teachings, he didn't associate with personality.
Interesting.
So the idea of personality as being pervasive as part of the whole scheme of things is so critical, because that's how we share the love of the Father.
With each other?
Yeah. Well, and with the Father too.
Yeah.
Is with our personality.
Yeah.
And so that's how we commune with one another or with the Father. It's through personality. Everything pretty much is done through personality, because personality is a unifier of spirit, mind, and soul. And soul. Yeah, so it's a unifier of all those. And it's an interesting study.
Well, I have a question more. I have more questions. We could probably be here for a while, but so for us as evolving mortals, engaged with the Spirit of truth, which is essentially the Spirit of Jesus, the Son, teaching us. Is there a relationship with that is comparable or is like, in all intents and purposes, our relationship with the Supreme? Like Jesus's life teachings with us, it's almost like it's co-creative, experiential, the Spirit of truth giving you this conviction that and you kind of follow the way and step into it. And then the result of following the way is Supreme's growing of some sort. And I was like kind of meditating on this. It's like probably not going to fully understand what the Supreme is or what it's really doing, except intellectually, but I do feel Jesus in my heart. I do feel the Spirit of truth, So I just wondering what your perspective was on that.
Well, I think you're absolutely correct. Even the way you said it, I thought was very good. So the Spirit of truth leads us into the truth, and then we only can experience the truth is through our experiences, what we do. So it's what we do when we live the truth. We got to live it. When we live the truth, then we're connected to the Supreme. Amen. So Michael, through the Spirit of truth, and of course the Mother Spirit, through the mind, is leading us into all truth. And so, but that's truth not true to us until we experience it. We don't know anything. We literally don't know anything till we experience it.
Yeah.
Once we experience it, then that's our truth. May not be somebody else's truth, but that's our truth. And once we have that, that's part of who and what we are, and that will be part of our whole resurrection process when we come together in our resurrection in the mansion worlds.
Oh, that's going to be one heck of a party, man.
That is, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This was so beneficial and enlightening. Honestly enlightening, as one of the fruits is. Thank you guys for joining us, and thank you, Buck. You're always welcome back here whenever. I love you. I love your family. Say hi to everyone, please, for me. Safe travels, and I'll see you on Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Thank you very much again, Derek, for the honor of having me on your show.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.